What would you have done, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? What would you have done if your partner was being threatened by a drunken madman holding a knife over his head? Would you have used the appropriate and reasonable force necessary to stop this man? That's exactly what Officer Waldman did. The facts of the case are these. Officer Waldman and his partner, Officer Levy, were working in the anti-crime unit in an undercover car, not wearing any uniforms, patrolling the area around Humboldt Park looking for a burglar. As they traveled, very slowly, carefully watching their surroundings, seeing if they could find any clues or see any sign of a suspect. As they were patrolling, a car came up behind them. This car wanted to pass them, put on his blinker, and began honking at them. Because the lanes were small, the street was narrow, they couldn't let him pass, and as soon as they were able to, they pulled off the side of the road, Officer Levy driving and Officer Waldman in the passenger seat, and they pulled off the road to leave plenty of room for this car to pass. But instead of passing, this car stopped. The driver opened his window and began screaming at the officers. Officer Levy attempted to defuse the situation by standing up, getting out of his car, and saying, "Police, keep on going." When he yelled police, this produced no visible reaction to the defendant, Mr. Ramirez, who was now running around the back of his car to confront Officer Levy. Officer Waldman, getting out of the car, watched the entire scene unfold as Officer Levy and Mr. Ramirez clashed in a brawl. Punches were being thrown. They were struggling against the back of the car, rolling around against the car, and that's when Officer Waldman saw the knife. He saw the knife as Mr. Ramirez raised it in the air and plunged it into Officer Levy's shoulder. Officer Levy dropped in pain, and he saw that the knife was being raised again. At this point, the defendant, Mr. Waldman, was running around the car, desperate to protect his partner from further injury. Officer Levy, as Officer Waldman walked around the car, he saw Mr. Ramirez raise the knife again over his head, about to bring it down. As he did this, he saw Officer Levy's arm grab him, grasping hold of his wrist as he was about to bring it down. But Officer Waldman watched as Officer Levy lost this grip, and the knife was raised again, ready to be plunged down, causing serious injury or possibly even death to Officer Levy. Officer Waldman had to think in a split-second decision, his police officer instincts kicking in, his years of training, his massive experience in the use of firearms. Officer Waldman knew that using a firearm and discharging a firearm should be his last resort measure, as mandated by Chicago police officer conduct. And after Officer Waldman thought through all of the possibilities, all the potential things that he could have done to prevent this serious injury or death to his partner, he did the only thing that made sense. He took out his gun and he shot Mr. Ramirez in the shoulder, which caused him to stop immediately. Now, the plaintiff is going to bring up testimony that says that Officer Waldman did not act reasonably, that he should have potentially fired a warning shot, that he should have yelled out, "Stop! Police," that he should have engaged in the fight, and that using a gun was a completely negligent use of his authority, and that it went far beyond the bounds of what a normal police officer should do. But Officer Waldman will testify that while all this was happening, he thought through all of these options. He had heard Officer Levy shout, "Stop! Police," which had no visible effect on Mr. Ramirez. Officer Waldman himself had yelled police as he walked around the car to confront Mr. Ramirez. This also had no effect. Officer Waldman could have fired a warning shot, but that wouldn't have stopped the momentum of the knife going down into Officer Levy, causing him serious injury. Officer Waldman could have tried to engage in the fight, but he was far away. It's possible that he couldn't have made it. Officer Waldman will say that he did not believe it was reasonably possible for him to make it over in time to stop Mr. Ramirez before the knife went down. Officer Waldman, his training, his instincts kicking in, as he thought through all of these processes, determined that the only thing he could possibly do to stop the injury to his partner would be to shoot him. Ladies and gentlemen, this man had a knife. He was poised, he was dangerous, he was drunk, and he was angry. There was no reason to what he was doing. There was no thought behind what he was doing as he stabbed madly. He'd already stabbed a police officer once. Officer Waldman acted reasonably to protect his partner. His partner could have easily died. You will hear in tonight's case testimony not only from Officer Waldman talking about his thought processes and his decision, but you will also hear from Dr. Winston Marshall, who examined the medical reports and also examined Mr. Ramirez. Dr. Marshall will show that the medical reports corroborate Officer Waldman's story that when he was shot, Mr. Ramirez had his hand raised behind his back, leaning back slightly, about to plunge, and he was in motion as he was plunging the knife. This is exactly what happened. The man had a knife. What would you have done? What would you have done if the man you were sworn to protect, your partner, was in danger of serious injury or even possible death? Would you have acted with the necessary and reasonable force needed to prevent this from happening? Officer Waldman did, and he acted reasonably. There was not a shred of negligence in anything that he did, as he diligently thought through everything that he was doing in order to protect his partner. Thank you.